everyone, welcome back. So let's talk tech in the classroom. I know a lot of you are super excited about incorporating new tools, but then there's this little voice, at least I know I have one, a little voice in the back of your head saying, yeah, but how am I going to keep everyone actually focused with all these shiny new distractions, right? Well, good news is we're diving deep into that today. We've got a bunch of really interesting resources that tackle this head on.
Yeah, it's a real balancing act, isn't it?
Totally. It's like, how do we harness the power of this tech without, turning our classrooms into digital free-for-alls?
Right.
Which, by the way, not sponsored by Black Mirror, but that's kind of where my brain went with this first one, this whole student screen monitoring thing.
Oh, yeah.
Little intense, right? Like, on the one hand, you can see exactly what kids are doing on their devices in real time, which, hello, teacher superpower, but also kind of Big Brother-ish. What do you think?
It's tricky. For me, it comes down to purpose and transparency. Imagine you're in the middle of a lesson, and you see a student who's just totally lost in some online maze instead of, working on the activity.
Oh, yeah.
This tool lets you address that right away, give them a little nudge back on track without having to interrupt the flow for everyone else.
That's a good point, like a more personalized approach to classroom management.
Exactly. But the key is being open with students about it. If they understand why it's being used, that it's there to help them, it becomes less about, oh, the teacher's spying on me, and more about, okay, they're paying attention, they're there to support me if I need it.
Support. That's the magic word, right? And speaking of support, this next one you sent, the Education Table podcast, they had a whole episode on inclusive practices, which I loved. They made this really interesting distinction between inclusion and inclusive practice. Can you unpack that a little?
Yeah, so inclusion at its most basic is like everybody's in the same room. Great. But inclusive practice, that's about what's happening in that room. It's about acknowledging that kids learn in different ways at different paces and then actually doing something about it.
So not just inviting everyone to the party, but making sure everyone actually enjoys themselves once they're there.
100%.
Oh.
Differentiated instruction, multiple means of engagement. It's about giving every student a real shot at success.
How's that? Okay, switching gears for a second, because we've got to talk about the Abbott Elementary clip you sent.
So good.
I mean, who doesn't love a little Abbott in their lives?
The best.
But for anyone who hasn't seen it, it really highlights the importance of having a supportive colleague, like a Barbara.
Yeah.
The wise, experienced teacher who's always there to lend an ear or offer advice.
Everyone needs a Barbara in their corner. Someone who gets it, who's been there, done that. It makes such a difference.
Huge. Especially when you're trying to navigate all this new tech stuff, right?
Totally. Having that sounding board, someone to bounce ideas off of or just de-stress with, it's invaluable.
For real. Okay, so speaking of tech, you also mentioned a webinar on Universal Design for Learning UDL happening tomorrow.
Yes. It's tomorrow, October 16th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time.
Perfect. Now, break down UDL for us. What is it and why should we care?
Think of UDL like this. It's about building in flexibility and options from the get-go. It's not just about supporting students with disabilities. It's about creating a learning environment that works for everyone by offering different ways to engage with the material, different ways to show what they know.
Right. So not everyone's going to thrive with just a lecture and a worksheet. Some might need to move around. Some might need visuals. Some might.
Exactly. And this webinar is going to dive into all sorts of practical ways to do that. Plus, it's free. So win-win.
Awesome. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. Now, before we wrap up, we got to talk audiobooks. You shared that story about a student who, finally experienced the joy of finishing a book because of audiobooks, and it just really resonated with me.
It's amazing, right?
It is, and yet there's still some, hesitation around audiobooks. Is it really reading?
Right.
But to me, if it's opening doors for kids, if it's fostering a love of stories and learning, who cares?
I'm with you. It's about meeting students where they are and finding what works.
Totally. And you know what else I realized? We can take a page from, well, not a page, that's ironic, but we can get inspiration from other areas of our lives. Like you were telling me about how you've been using AI for meal planning.
Oh, don't even get me started.
I know, it's hilarious. But then it got me thinking, if AI can help me figure out dinner on a Tuesday night, imagine what it could do in the classroom.
Right. And we talk a lot about using AI for lesson planning, but what about things like, analyzing student data to personalize learning activities or even provide more targeted feedback?
Whoa. That's next level stuff. See, this is what I love about these deep dives, always learning something new.
Me too?
So we've covered a lot today, folks, from the ethics of screen monitoring to the power of audiobooks, but I think the big takeaway here is that technology is a tool, and like any tool, it's all about using it thoughtfully and intentionally to create the best possible learning environment for every student.
I think that's a great way to put it.
So as you head into a new week of teaching, here's my challenge to you. What's one small step you can take to bring some of these ideas into your own classroom? Maybe it's trying out a new tech tool, having a